You're about to meet the innovators and influencers who are restoring the judeo-christian foundations of our culture right here on The Patrick Coffin Show.
And now, here's your host, Patrick Coffin.
Yes, indeed. Another episode of The Patrick Coffin Show. I am Patrick Coffin. Very happy to have an old friend join me to talk about parenting and about how to ignore the experts with style and panache. His name's Dr. Ray Guarendi. You know him from The Doctor Is In. You know him from his many books like You're a Better Parent Than You Think, The Adoption Option, and a whole plethora, so I get to use the word plethora there, of books. drray.com is his website. He has a new book. I want to show off the title. I love this. Advice Worth Ignoring. How tuning out the experts can make you a better parent. So whether or not you're a parent, you're probably going to be one, or at least you're a child, you're going to get a ton out of this book. Dr. Ray Guarendi, welcome aboard, sir.
I really don't like the way you introduced me, Patrick. Old friend. I'm assuming that means you and I have been friends a while as opposed to describing me.
Yeah. The contract that you signed before you appeared in the show indicated that you would go along with the facade that we're old friends. So I don't know what you're trying to, do here, because we are live. We're live,
Paul,
Dr.
you've
Ray.
always been special to me.
Well, I like your taste in, that's a new suit design there. It's just Southern California.
I'm wearing slimming colors.
Ohio. Hey, experts, does that mean we have a license to ignore the advice in your book?
Well, if you would have read the book, Patrick, you would see that in the very first introduction, I say, what's the difference? Here you have some fellow with letters after his name giving you advice on what to ignore. The difference is this. Many experts give advice toned that says, you don't do this, don't blame me if your kid is spending a whole week on Springer. Because I told you the psychologically enlightened way to raise children.
Right.
My advice is consider it, ponder it. If it works for you, if it meshes with your value system, decide what you want to use. If not, ignore it.
Well, Ray, to be honest, I didn't read the book. I Larry King'd it. I went, in your book that I loved, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
so
Patrick,
fair enough. What I like
you
about the book, in addition to your ever witty style and hard-hitting content, is that I related to all 50 things that you mentioned. Either something I've heard by someone on Dr. Oz, or someone from People Magazine, or some shrink who's selling his latest widget bit of advice. And I like the pushback because as a parent, I related to the fact that if I tune out the peer pressure to not use certain language in the way, let's say the way I guide or discipline or encourage or affirm, my relationship with my kids gets better. And one of the things that drives me insane about just your industry, the psychological industry, if you will, is the refusal to go anywhere moral. Things are all euphemized, right? So something's inappropriate, or we don't do this, using the royal we. Where did this is this been a constant idea virus that you're not allowed to say to a kid, behavior X is bad or wrong, fill in the blank, rather than use all this soft love bomb language that often confuses the kid and doesn't get anything done?
It arouses guilt. We know as psychologists that guilt is not a good thing, no matter where it's expressed, even if it's appropriate. So when you tell somebody that something is bad, look what you're saying, Patrick. This is highly judgmental. Let me put it to you this way. It's highly inappropriate.
You're right.
To do this.
Yeah.
So we have to antisepticize the language first and foremost. You bring up another issue. And that is this. Why do so many grandparents who raise 3, 4, 5, 8, 9 children observe things like, I don't recall the defiance and the frustration and the arguments with my children that my daughter is having with her 6-year-old and her 3-year-old?
Right.
What has happened? one of the big factors, besides the ever assaulting culture, is the onslaught of guys like me, the experts. We are here. We have new and enlightened theories, new and improved. All the people who came before us were Neanderthals who didn't understand human nature, and therefore it's a good thing we came along to straighten everybody else out.
Right. Meanwhile, parents have been at parenting for millennia, but somehow, whether it's Benjamin Spock or fill in the blank, B.F. Skinner, it seems like every 30 years there's a new revolution in the way it's really going to work. It reminds me of something analogical here, and that's the diet industry, right? Every 45 minutes there's a new diet fad that contradicts all the protocols of the previous one. So then it becomes, well, battle of the experts. I'm trying to do the best I can here as a parent. Who do I listen to? Your message seems to be, look in the mirror and listen to that guy or that gal.
There is nothing inherently bad, and I use that word deliberately, about listening to the experts. You have to know how to interpret them. You can't just assume that they're so much smarter than you are, that they have so much in-touch insight that you don't have because you're just a mom. I, Dr. Ray Guarendi, have letters after my name. I, Dr. Ray Guarendi, am highly trained to handle any situation. Patrick, I will tell you some of the most obnoxious kids I have dealt with have been the offspring of social workers, of psychologists, of child development teachers.
Do you find that kids are more likely to suffer from high self-esteem than low self-esteem?
First of all, the research says that self-esteem is basically related to nothing. That's the first thing.
You mean because there's no criteria against which to measure your growth or your decline?
That, and the fact that you cannot just raise self-esteem independently of accomplishments or competence or moral behavior. You can't just tell somebody how wonderful they are and therefore their grades are going to go up and they're not going to use drugs and they're going to be more respectful and they'll have a better work ethic. There is no connection there.
I saw a New Yorker cartoon. I'd like to get permission. I'm going to show it up. It could be part of my logo. You'll appreciate this. I don't think I shared this with you before. It's a dad in a den, and the dad's looking at the door of the den, and his toddler, probably 4 or 5 years old, is trying to waddle into the den with a trophy that's bigger than the kid is, and he's saying to the dad, "We lost." So the participation trophy movement, right? The soft, what'd you call it? The assault of low expectations, just showing up, deserves some kind of laurels.
I have seen surveys that say approximately 1 in 6 college students are on some type of medication or therapy. Do you think this is the natural byproduct of us always telling everyone how wonderful they are no matter what? The same as 2 + 2 = 5. You just punched a kid in the head, but you're still a wonderful, wonderful behaving person.
Right.
And the idea that everybody now has to have safe spaces and therapy dogs and Play-Doh, it's the natural outgrowth of this enormously big-waved tsunami of we're all just special.
Where do you stand on the crowd that says any form of spanking is worse than genocide? Because there's a group of parental advocates that are, I would say, deeply wedded to the idea that any form of corporal punishment, any, as Bishop Sheen would say, a repeated pat on the back that is low on the spine and hard enough and frequent enough to get the point across. What about never spanking at all, ever, no matter what the kid, no matter what the behavior?
Doesn't matter what I say, Patrick. Let's look at what the studies say. Now, the vast majority of experts, and it is truly child-rearing sin number 1. You can allow a child to watch 500 channels of rot gut TV and not get the opprobrium that you would get if you swatted a bottom. We can allow people to rot out a child's soul, but don't spank a bottom.
Mm-hmm.
American Academy of Pediatrics did a survey of the literature. They were forced to conclude, I believe against their will, that spanking when done in a loving home by loving parents does not cause any of these ill effects that the theories say they do. At the end of the article, they basically said, well, we're still against it. And I remember talking to the article saying, well, that's okay. You can be against it.
Yeah.
Just don't look at parents who do it as Neanderthal troglodytes. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if a parent doesn't want to spank, don't spank. That's your decision as a parent. I had a mother come to me once. She said she was new to a neighborhood. She went to a mother's group, and they were asking questions about her life. She said to me, I got the impression that I could tell them I had been into drugs, into a ravaging motorcycle gang that liked to destroy property, and they would all show polite interest and ask me questions. But I happened to mention that I believed in spanking. She said the silence was audible.
Right.
They gasped. How could you think that?
Yeah, and they use the most pejorative language. Why would you want to haul off and hit your kid? I understand some Scandinavian countries are looking to outlaw it. That you can.
That's the movement.
The
behavior
movement. Police can come by and charge you or jail you. As the handbasket gets closer to the waterfall edge, Dr. Ray, I wanted to ask you about the very definition of parenting. Now that that's become shifting sands, that the very definition of what a parent is now open to ongoing revision. We've got the 4-parent model using various kinds of new reproductive technologies. We have the ongoing propagandization against the mom-dad nuclear family, as though any combination of human emotional pairings equals parents. Is the changing definition of parent itself and the confusion that swirls around it part of the problem? And that's why your average mom and dads trying to start a family are more likely to look to the high priest or priestess known as the child psychologist expert, because the definition is now even shady. Does that make sense?
There's an irony here, Patrick. As we have broadened our acceptance of what makes a family, anything, whatever you call it, that's what it is. We have narrowed our acceptance of how you are to raise children. You brought up the word parent.
Yeah.
I think for the first time in human history, the word parent is now a verb. To parent your child. To parent in the correct way.
Yeah, the kissing cousin to spouse, isn't it? It's generic. Everything's genericized.
An example of this is in the adoption area. Virtually 90+% of adoption professionals will say that the preferred adoption theme is open adoption.
Which is, for people who don't know what that is, what's open adoption?
Open means that the birth parent knows at some level who the adoptive parents are, the adoptive parents know the birth parent, and the child knows both. And this can go all the way from we share visitations, to we share pictures, to we have meetings. And most adoption professionals look at open adoptions as a wonderful, wonderful thing. My theory has always been that's in part gained traction because we have redefined family. A child with one mom and one dad, as adopted, well, wouldn't 2 moms and 2 dads
or 3
and 4 grandmas, wouldn't that be even better? Because the idea that a mom and a dad is the best place to raise a child, as the research does say, by the way, is something that, it's one option, but it's not the best option. And I see this. It's very, very common. Interestingly enough, as a psychologist, I see all of the troubles created when families split up. And part of the reason is these wildly diverse parenting styles, all of the dynamics that enter in. Dad becomes Disney dad. Mom tries to hold it together. Mom can't control the kid, so she tells him go live with dad when he's 14. A similar thing happens, for example, in the adoption sphere with open adoptions. It isn't necessarily that this is one big happy family of 6 parents, 9 grandparents, 4 step siblings. Not necessarily. Oftentimes there's a lot of emotional dynamics that can complicate the picture. But for now, they're being ignored.
And you have 10 children, all adopted, so this is not theoretical for you. Do you draw from your experience as a parent as much or more than your experience as a clinician with the degrees? Are you kind of, is this kind of book, Advice Worth Ignoring, as much autobiographical as it is instructional?
There's an irony again there, Patrick. Most people give me credibility because I have 10 kids. I tell them my 10 kids give me good stories, and maybe it gives me a better sense of empathy for certain kinds of problems. But my real experience comes from seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of parents and kids over 35 years. That dwarfs my own in-person experience with my children, even though there's 10 of them.
Quick sidebar, Catholic to Catholic here. What you just said seems to be a magnificent verification that celibacy is no demerit or no disadvantage to dispensing wisdom because of the experience you have hearing hundreds, sometimes thousands over a priestly career of the same basic plot with the same general principles to resolve these things. You don't have to have 10, let's say you don't have to have given birth to be an excellent obstetrician, for instance.
If I ever have a brain tumor, I would prefer that my surgeon not have had a brain tumor.
Right.
I would prefer that he be healthy. If I had to experience everything I deal with, I would be such a mess that I would be able to offer no help to anyone. If someone comes to me for marital advice or child rearing advice or advice dealing with depression, I would want them to value what I have to say because I've avoided those things.
Yeah.
When someone says to you, and this is very common, "Oh, you're giving me advice about parenting? Do you have children?" What they're really saying is, I don't want to hear your advice because I want to invalidate it because it doesn't sit well with me.
Right.
I've never been accused, back before I had children, I was never accused of being somewhat ill-informed because I didn't have children, as long as I gave the folks the advice they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
The instant I gave them advice they didn't want to hear, "Oh, how many children do you have?"
Right, which is fallacious.
Watch what you say to psychologists.
Sure. Yeah. Well, also, married psychologists can read into or can insert their own biases with their own spouse and justify their own possible bad behavior in the way they dispense advice to patients. That's got to be, objectively verified that your own personal bias, no matter what it is going to affect the way you talk to people about what they're dealing with. I wanted to ask you about the whole friendship as best friend syndrome or phenomenon, where the worst sin in the world would be to have your kid fear you, or fear's maybe the wrong word. The idea that actions come with consequences, and we don't want the child to have any kind of healthy reticence to repeat behavior because of the consequence, whether it's a spank or whether it's a timeout or whether it's a severe talking to, because we want to be best friends with our children. I hear this all the time in places like malls. I'll overhear, the good job soccer mom or Disney. I never heard that phrase before, by the way, Disney dad. Totally stealing that. The idea that the best friend status is the best status. You say what?
I have 10 children. When they were little, if one of them said to me, "I don't like you. You're not my friend," I would say to them, "Well, that's okay. I got 5 or 6 kids who do like me. Any given moment, I got a 50% approval rating." One of the drives to be a child's best friend is having smaller families. If you have 1 child or 2 children, your whole parenting focus is on those children. And if that relationship gets uncomfortable or negative at some level, I've blown it with 50% of my kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's one factor. Another factor is this. I always tell parents, you want to be your child's best friend. You do. But you have to be the parent first.
Yeah.
If you shoot for best friend first, you won't get best friend and you won't get parent either. You'll lose both. That's the factor there. If a child likes you all the time, you're parenting very badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the New York Times are waxing rhapsodic about who you are. Careful, right? What about the glass screen wars and the normalization of, let's say, tweens, kids say 10 to 12, spending many hours, more hours by far, staring at Pinterest or God knows what else on their smartphones, and parents afraid to intervene because everybody else is doing it?
Technology has made it a requirement that parents have to have spines 3 times as thick as they used to be. It is very difficult as a parent to look too far out of the norm.
Mm-hmm.
So when your child looks at you and says, like the old cliche used to be thrown at parents, I'm the only one who doesn't have.
Yeah.
That used to be false. It's not so much false anymore. And to be a parent that can stand strong against that cultural flow takes enormous emotional strength.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot worry that your child is going to hate you or is going to rebel or is going to create an emotional distance. You start worrying about that, you're in big trouble. My best advice, get a couple of parents who do agree with you. So you at least have a few other people saying to you, you're not crazy. The culture's gone wacky with its technological permissiveness. You're not crazy.
Almost like the parents are the embarrassing brand. You know, all my kids are wearing Armani, but my dad is a polyester cardigan. So there's a...
What's worse?
Keeping up with the Joneses as far as parenting goes, and the kids will... Because there's a book, I'm not sure if you've heard of this. Nicholas, the guy last name starts with a K. I just saw a bunch of reviews on it. I want to pick it up, maybe talk to him on this show. It's called Glow Kids, and it's on the phenomenon of children, tweens, and teenagers being addicted, and not in the psychobabble sense, actually compulsively drawn to these pixelated images on their devices. And I've witnessed young children go into a rage fest when the device is taken.
Yes.
And it's scary because it's on a dime rage against the parent that wouldn't be here. Give me your Dr. Seuss book. Oh, mommy, really? No, it's like...
Don't take my puzzles.
Yeah, silverback ape in half a second.
Yes, I tell parents, if you want to know how attached your child, and I used to say teens back when only teens had cell phones, but now it's child.
Yep.
Is attached to that device for some reason, usually a consequence, take it and study the reaction. Is it disappointment, mild frustration, or is it you have shattered my world? That will tell you all you need to know. Patrick, I cannot tell you how many parents, as part of their presentation in my office, have underestimated and miscalculated what unbridled technology has done to their kids, their relationship. There was an interesting survey I saw. What percentage of 11 to 19-year-olds do you think have come across pornography on the internet accidentally or on purpose? What percentage? 11 to 19-year-olds.
That's a scary one to answer. I'm going to go over 50%, but I might be grossly naive. Let's say 60%.
90.
90. So even if you have the best software, our family has covenanteyes.com, You can use the word Patrick for a coupon code. You get 30 days for free. There's a shameful plug, but it's excellent. But when they leave the house, you're subject to the mores and the presuppositions of the parents of the kids that your kids are hanging around.
You can't stop it all, but what you're going to try to do is not go with the flow of the way it's now done.
Mm-hmm.
You look at a restaurant, you see a mom and dad sitting with their 2 kids, one's 9, one's 11.
Yep.
Kids are both on their phones. The mom and dad would never think when we go out to eat somewhere, when we go to anybody's house, you don't have your phone. They don't even think of this. It's a matter of, well, they have a phone. They want to be on it. Keeps them quiet. Okay. Besides, I don't want to have to deal with their frustration and their poutiness. That's what happens. We surrender.
How important is it to not delay a parental response to bad behavior? Because a lot of parents will observe and they'll pick their moment and they'll say, honey, last night when you did this, it was inappropriate or whatever. To kind of, without being a helicopter parent, nickel and diming and micromanaging, why is it important to have the consequence applied as soon as possible?
There are not too many criminal offenses that have no statute of limitations. Murder's one. Pretty big offense.
Mm-hmm.
Most kids don't offend that heavily in their home. They do other things. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they hurt a brother, they destroy something and try to hide it.
Yep.
Standard stuff. The experts used to say discipline has to be immediate. That's one of my advices worth ignoring. If it's not, then the link, the time frame between the offense and the consequence gets too long. There is no statute of limitations for most kids over 3 or 4. Immediate discipline is most appropriate, no pun intended, excuse the word, most advisable for kids that are 1 and 2 years of age. Mm-hmm. After that, even a 3-year-old, you can say, you didn't listen at church today. Now, when we get home, you're going to go to the corner.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 45-minute delay there. But you reminded him. He can make the link. He's not a dog. A dog has to have a link immediately or he can't connect.
Right.
Children very quickly are able to make a link. I tell parents, most misbehavior that comes to your attention after the fact. You found out about it. You noticed it. 2 days later, 3 days later,
mm-hmm.
The 9-year-old daughter tattled on him, which she does about every 4 minutes. So you found out about it. Well, then you deal with it. Sometimes I tell parents deliberately delay because you want to calm down. You don't want to tell the kid, that's it, that is it, you are grounded until your wedding rehearsal dinner, don't even ask. You don't want to fire off something like that in the heat of the moment.
Where do you stand on the age appropriateness of the sex talk? Now, I know certain kids are a lot more sensitive and are able to, accommodate this information, but the mechanics of intercourse and the birds and the bees, 8 too young, 12 too old, where do you, because this is the one that parents will want to dance around, and both parents will look at the other hoping that that one will step up and give the talk. Is there an age range that you can recommend, even though kids are different individually?
More important than age range is process. Most sex talks are not your basic, okay, your dad talked to you for 45 minutes, there, we took care of that.
Yep.
Woo, glad that thing's done. Son, you're 24. I wanted to make sure you understood it.
After 3 kids, son, I think you need to know how these kids are caused. Now, get a pencil.
It's a process. I'll give you a small example. My son Peter was 5. He noticed a little baby at a restaurant. He said to me, was I in mommy's belly? No, Petey, you were not. You were in another mommy's belly. How did I get there? Now, my wife was not around, so I quickly called her to say, okay, what do I say about this? She wasn't home. I had to do it myself. I was on my own. You can always use God.
Mm-hmm.
God put you there, Petey.
Yeah.
And I figured, okay, that'll be enough of that. He then said, how did God put me there?
What were the secondary causes the divinity used?
Yeah. How'd God do it?
Yeah.
And I said, well, what do you mean? Which is always a good question for a psychologist. You always have to, if you don't know what to say, you say, what do you mean? He said, well, did he throw me down in there, or did he just lay me in there? Whew. He laid you in there, Petey. Why? Why didn't that other mommy keep me? He was leading the conversation, and I was answering at a level appropriate to his age. I wasn't going to get into the birds and bees at age 5.
Sure.
Although we had already now talked about being in a mommy's belly, a little bit about how God was involved, and inch by inch this stuff comes out. Many parents have the quote-unquote sex talk when the kid says something. He says a word or he uses a phrase that he heard at school. Parent says, do you know what that means? And the kid goes, no. Butkus uses it all the time.
Yeah.
You don't know what it means? Let me tell you what it means, son. That kind of thing. So I always tell parents, go with the flow of the kid's lead, because that starts pretty early.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if they go around other kids, this stuff starts at 6, 7, and 8 years of age.
Right. And normally when they've read all the books and they've rehearsed it, they're 2 years too late.
Yes. And their moral shaping has come from their peers.
I'll finish with this because I appreciate your time, Dr. Ray, because this is something I'm asked a lot, and I'm at the age now where a lot of my friends have kids of this age. The pressure to call a special playmate at school a boyfriend or a girlfriend is enormous. It starts at middle school.
Yes.
And some well-meaning grandparents and others, Susie, do you have a boyfriend? And the 7-year-old turns, crimson. What? They don't want to hear this. This is not language that they should be listening to, and they can't relate to it whatsoever. And then you have the parent who, I guess there's two extremes. The bubble mentality, for lack of a better phrase. You just keep them in a bubble till they're 24, and then maybe you can vet the dates as the suitors as they roll in. Or this is Janie's boyfriend. He's 14. His name's Rick. He's really a good kid. A boy. I was not permitted to think of girlfriend at age 14. Why? Because I was raised to believe that courtship belongs to marriage, and dating belongs to courtship. This is all frog disqualification process. That your relationship's going to end in a breakup or it's going to end at the altar. So let's make that as smooth as we can. Have you noticed this trend to date earlier and earlier and to sexualize what for generations was simply normal boy-girl friendship at a certain age?
There is an overall pressure to grow up in the worst sense of the word, too fast. Sexuality is one of the main areas. What happens is, well-meaning grandma, so who do you like at school? Yeah. I heard you like Jimmy. And the little girl's embarrassed and thinking, I guess I'm supposed to like somebody.
Right.
This is what happens. There was a survey done, Patrick, that asked the kids, I think they were middle schoolers, when is it okay to get physical with someone? The majority of them responded, when you love them.
Yeah. Then
they asked the kids, have you ever been in love? The majority said yes. Connect the dots.
Right. Dot A and dot B. Wow.
This makes a parent have to correct all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if somebody says to my 7th grader, so who's your girlfriend? And I'll say, well, he doesn't. I jump in. I'll say, well, he doesn't have a girlfriend. He's got some girls he thinks are cute. But at this point, he doesn't need a girlfriend in his life. Complicates things.
Yeah.
Now, he may look at me as if to say, yeah, Dad, I do have a girlfriend because all my friends at school have put us together. Mm-hmm. Okay, but as long as I don't cooperate. I've noticed what a lot of parents do to cooperate, Patrick, is that they include the latest boyfriend, girlfriend as a member of the family.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to go on vacation, my 15-year-old daughter is going to take this boy. If we're going to have Christmas Eve, well, her boyfriend's here. Everything we do as a family is now inclusive of this kid who is here today, gone tomorrow. I had that happen a lot in my own extended family.
Mm-hmm.
We used to call it the girlfriend and the boyfriend du jour.
Yeah.
You know, this Christmas is different than the one last Christmas that we all had to accept as part of the family.
Yeah. Do you find parents are afraid to forbid a relationship because they don't want to create rebels in teen pregnancy by clamping down too assertively that they'll thereby push the kid away? And then they just stay frozen because they don't decide anything?
This is one of my biggest pieces of advice worth ignoring, which is if your standards are too high, if you're too far out of the parenting norm, all you're going to do is create a morally rebellious child. All you're going to do is to create a child who's a faker, who lives a double life, who basically nods to you and then is the biggest wretch walking the face of the earth. That's a fear that has been created by the experts because their view of it is you don't understand. Psychologically speaking, you are messing your kid up. You have to compromise. Well, the problem with that is when they say compromise, they mean compromise your morals. And so You're absolutely right. I've never seen a generation of parents so fearful of making child-rearing mistakes at every level.
Dr. Ray, this has been a podcast worth ignoring. I thank you for writing the book. You can get a copy of it at patrickcoffin.media. I'll just throw it up there to my viewers. drray.com is the website. Check him out on EWTN television. Living Right with Dr. Ray, his radio show is heard all over the visible and audible galaxy through the EWTN radio platform. Dr. Ray Guarendi, thanks a lot, man. It's been a treat, as always. Come back again soon.
Patrick, you have always been a friend and an old one.
All right, tell you what, deal. I'll from here on, you'll be my young friend, Dr. Ray. Fair enough?
Can you do something with this stuff around my eyes here?
Oh, no, those are called, it's called work done. You can get a better doctor, though. All right,
Thanks,
Godspeed,
Patrick.
Dr. Ray. All right, take
I'll
good care.
see you.
I'm Patrick Coffin. This is The Patrick Coffin Show.